sometimes dead is better.
Well, sometimes they come back. This is a Stephen King short story adaptation that was requested by a huge supporter of the channel, DMC Campbell, so shout out to my other favorite Kiwi. The movie starts off with some inner monologue by Jim Norman, played by Tim Matheson, as he, his wife Sally, played by Brooke Adams, and their son Scott, played by Robert Hy Gorman, arrive at their new-ish house. They've moved to Jim's hometown because he got a job as a teacher. Obviously, his new students are thrilled to meet him.
You'll pass if you do the work. Pass this anyway.
Mr. King doesn't like to give his new school employees an easy first day, does he? That evening, we get a flashback to when Jim, played by Zachary Ball, and his older brother Wayne, played by Chris Demetral, were kids. It seemed to be a pretty happy childhood, with the exception of one deadly incident involving Lawson, played by Robert Russler, Vinny, played by Nicholas Sadler, North, played by Bentley Mitchum, and Mueller, played by Don Ruffin. Just a group of greasers who are way too old to be picking on a couple of kids. Things go from bad to worse to even fucking worse when Wayne is accidentally stabbed and a train heads their way. Who knew parking your car on train tracks was a bad idea? This explains why Jim and his parents left. The following day, one of Jim's students, Billy, played by Matt Nolan, has a chat with him before riding off. Since Billy dropped his wallet, Jim follows after him to return it. It's a good thing he did, because a mysterious car is attempting to run Billy off the road, or make him roadkill. Unfortunately, that's exactly what happens. And what's even worse is anyone who was around to witness this only saw Billy and Jim in his van. No mysterious black car. Things are going real well for Jim at his new job, huh? What could possibly make everything worse? How about Lawson appearing in his class, seeming to have risen from his grave unscathed? Can't exactly go to the principal with that one. All of this is clearly taking a toll on Jim's psyche, especially with Lawson taunting him and being plagued with flashbacks about Wayne. It doesn't take long for yet another student in Jim's class to disappear, this being Kate, played by Tasia Valenza. One reason why Jim finds this unsettling is because he had a nightmare involving her, Lawson, and Vinny the previous night. So, he calls for a search for the missing girl, only to find her in the same barn from his nightmare. Jim insists this was murder, just like Billy.
It's a matter of record you've had some emotional problems in the past. I was just wondering how you're handling this.
And wouldn't you know it, Vinny has joined Jim's class in Kate's place. Obviously there's a pattern here, and it ain't a good one. Jim isn't the only one to pick up on it though, as Chip, played by Chad Nierges, shows up at his door.
They said they knew you a long time ago, and they were gonna get even.
Well, if this wasn't clear before, it definitely is now. Lawson and Vinny are after Jim specifically.
We can't keep running from them!
You might want to walk a little faster. You're a jock, come on!
Chip!
I fucking told you. So Chip's on his own for now, as Jim takes measures to protect his family. At least he doesn't have to go far to talk to the police. It's not gonna help, is it? Let's check in on Chip. How's he doing?
Time to rock, jock.
So I guess that means North will be attending school now. This group clearly has bigger plans than picking off the student body one by one, especially since they waste no time in terrorizing Scott in Jim's absence. With this direct attack on his family, Jim decides to come clean with Sally about what's going on here. In an effort to get some answers, Jim searches for Officer Nell, played by the late Duncan McLeod. He tells Jim that the three greasers are back. No shit. And this Milford that they keep mentioning is actually a cemetery. This is where Jim finds each of their graves. So what he has to do now is find Mueller before they do. Since this is before Google was readily accessible, a quick peek at the phone book leads him right to the guy, now played by William Sanderson. Initially, Jim believes that they have to go to the old train tunnel. While he's not wrong, he is missing some key components, like the fact that his wife and kid are vulnerable to some undead terrorizing. Jim takes them to the church for protection, while he returns to his childhood home to retrieve some important items. The really terrifying part is the late fees on those library books. Mueller decides that he's going to face off against his old buddies with Jim. Quick question, did either of you have a backup vehicle? I guess Jim's gonna have to catch up with them on foot. I would recommend the Edward method. The resurrected douchebags make a pit stop at the church where they intend to capture Sally and Scott. But that shouldn't be a problem as long as they're smart enough to stay within the safety of the building.
Scott!
You love your daddy, Scott.
God damn it. So everybody meets up in the train tunnel just like before. Only this time, Mueller is the one who gets stabbed, which allows Wayne to return. And the brothers once again face off against the greasers. Turns out, Wayne isn't the only thing that came back. With the bullies dead, again, Jim and Wayne have something of a reconnect. Through this, Wayne is finally able to move on, as is Jim and his family. And with that, the credits roll. What I liked about this is that the story was interesting, and feels like it would pair nicely with the Pet Sematary as a double feature. The atmosphere and settings are very much giving the New England town during fall vibes, so it would also make a good October/autumn movie. Despite the fact that this is a made-for-TV movie, the acting is decent. Bonus points to Robert Russler for being a downright creep. The practical effects are another impressive element here. Once again, given the whole made-for-TV bit, Tom McLaughlin's style of filmmaking shines through. And I think he did well in pushing the limits of an early 90s TV movie. I have heard from others that this adaptation is pretty close to its source material, so bonus points for that. In a way, I can see why it may not be so well known compared to other Stephen King adaptations. It lacks some shock value to the story. I wouldn't call this the scariest Stephen King adaptation. It's more eerie and unsettling rather than full-on terrifying. I did give some praise to McLaughlin's work on this film, but let's also keep in mind that he has 4 horror movies to his name so far. The most notable being Jason Lives. So, horror may not be his strongest genre. It feels like this movie would fit right in as an episode of The Twilight Zone, or Tales from the Crypt. And maybe some would like it more if it were formatted that way. With all that being said, I'm giving Sometimes They Come Back 6 out of 10 bloody thumbs up. I found that Sometimes They Come Back exceeded my expectations of a made-for-TV movie from the 90s. Maybe not by a whole lot, but it was still better than what I was expecting. It has a good story for horror, and interesting antagonists. It has plot holes and some portions where things feel a little bit slow. If I were given the choice between this film and Pet Sematary 1989, I'd probably go with Pet Sematary. I would recommend this movie to Stephen King adaptation completionists, people who enjoy their horror movies when they aren't too scary, anyone looking for a good double feature when they're watching Pet Sematary, and anyone wanting something to add to their autumn movie list. See you later.